internet's like so slow everywhere right now.
Oh, I am so happy. I've got great fiber internet here.
Mm-hmm.
If I was still living in Florida, oh, it used to be bad on any given evening.
Yeah. Back in cave country, right?
Yeah,
You're down there.
yeah.
That works. All right. So people are starting to join now. We'll give them a couple more
Okay.
seconds to really get in there, and then
Cool.
I'll share this once my internet's catching up here. There we go. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. All right, so
Okay.
Thank you, Jill, for hanging out with us.
Yeah.
Another chance of getting an interview. It's always great talking to you. We had a really great time with you being at the shop last time you were in.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Things have changed a lot since I last saw you. Just a couple months ago, eh?
Just a couple months. Yeah.
Who would have ever imagined?
I know.
I'm here in Carleton Place, Ontario, Canada, so just south of the nation's capital, Ottawa, and here at home, isolating like everybody else. So I'm the homebound explorer these days.
Nice. I saw. So explain that little video you did. I didn't get a chance to click on it because I was working on other stuff. What were you up to there, huh?
Oh, last night's video. Yeah. I put up a little public service announcement from, I'm the explorer in residence for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, which seems like a really ironic title right now. So I thought I'd put up a little video about what the explorer in residence does these days.
Nice. And where was that? That was on your personal page or your?
It's on YouTube and it's on my Facebook page, and I've been just putting it out on social media today.
I love it. That's too funny.
This is what happens when you're left at home and you have a couple beers in the fridge. And
yeah, absolutely. And Dropkick Murphys, right? You got to watch the Dropkick Murphys not too long ago. I didn't realize you were a fan.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's really interesting to see all the stuff that's being put out into the world free by people. It's kind of that kind of stuff is heartwarming. Whether it's the Dropkick Murphys or I read one of my kids' books on.
I saw that
on YouTube or put out one of my movies. It's like that's kind of one of the nice things that's happening is some new social connections like this online with people. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean we're socially distancing, but we can still interact with each other.
Well, it's funny. You and I are always so damn busy that we lose touch with some of our friends, and so got nothing but time right now. Yeah.
It's been interesting overall. So you were supposed to probably be at Beneath the Sea this coming weekend, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. There's been a lot that's been canceled already. Obviously my next 6 months of travel related work, which is everything that I do, has been canceled. So it's a whole new reality for all of us.
Wow. Yeah. It's so what are you working on? Are you getting a chance to work on anything from home at this point in time? That you were trying to catch up on?
Yeah, I cleaned the oven, I cleaned the grout, it's amazing. All those lists of like home things that you've always wanted to do, I've now have time for, including I've like serviced and reserviced all of my scuba equipment.
Right.
But yeah, I'm doing research for new pitches and future projects, and spending more time writing these days. Speculative stuff, really, because who knows whether the bulk of what I've always done will ever happen again. None of us really know what the future holds right now. So I'm just trying to stay productive. And, honestly, I've been somewhat, how should you say, like creatively paralyzed in some ways. I'm trying to stay focused. I'm trying to stay motivated, but I start something and I'm very easily distracted by the news right now. So I'm developing new work habits that take me away from the news and get me back into doing what I do well, which is creative things. And I'm not trying not to be too hard on myself. So, creating a video last night of me exploring my house was of no financial gain, but definitely made me feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it, have you been able to dive at all? I saw that you were out not too long ago, but have you gotten out at all?
Yeah. It's funny because I do have local diving that I can do here. I've got a 10-kilometer long cave, and I'm doing some research with a local biologist. All that's solo because the cave is like hardcore, dark, and silty and shitty, and all the wonderful things that I love.
Exactly.
But I've been kind of torn. Like I won't be exposing anyone, to me. Like it won't be breaking these terms of social isolation. But there's part of me that's thinking, should I really go in an overhead environment right now? Is that, it's not just my risk, just like the whole coronavirus thing. It's not just my risk, it's how I might infect other people. But I'm not going to infect anyone else by going cave diving. But what if something happened? How does that affect the community? And so up until this point, I've kind of decided not to go diving. As this stretches out longer and longer, then I may decide that that's a reasonable risk to take. I don't know. I got to really grapple my head around it. It's of course
at emergency response, right?
So I don't even know if any of my colleagues in the area are doing fills anyway, but and it's a hard choice. It's a hard choice.
It is.
I am getting on my bicycle this afternoon, but
nice. That's great. I've been thinking about that. We went from 70 to 30 and 6 inches of snow back to 50. It's been all over the place. So
I know. Well, our weather is pretty similar to yours.
Yeah.
We're a little bit nastier.
But
it's like, but finally, the last bits of the snowbanks and the ice are going away. Even though we had a blanket of snow twice last week, we might get another one. It's not staying anymore.
Yeah. It's little bits and pieces here and there, which is nice.
So what about you? Have you been diving or?
No, I was supposed to go this weekend, but going back to the hospital and getting work again, it becomes I'm working nights. So I opted for nights because I know that's kind of where the need is. So not really getting to doing the original plan. I get to service everybody else's gear. So that's my current diving position. We got a question from one of the people that's on live. What do you see the distant future is for rebreathers? I guess what's the future for rebreathers, and what's your take on rebreathers? And probably, I think what he's going for is the potential increase of use of rebreathers now that they're, I don't want to say more mainstream, but they're a little more known.
Yeah. So completely unrelated to the coronavirus.
Yes, completely unrelated.
I mean, I've been diving rebreathers since the mid to late 90s, so a long time. And I remember back then saying, at one point we're going to see more rebreathers on dive sites than open circuit. And it's kind of happening in the technical world anyway. I think in terms of technical rebreathers, the next big step forward is ubiquitous solid state sensing. So solid state O2, solid state CO2, solid state helium sensors and everything, so that we lose some of the consumable aspects. Also in the near future, I see a lot of people tinkering with rebreathers and figuring out how to turn them into ventilators.
People working on that.
In the big picture, rebreathers aren't all that complicated, right? But what we do have to do is get rid of the aspects of rebreathers that are finicky and consumable, and that's the sensors. That's the most vulnerable part of a rebreather, and so turning that into a solid state thing that doesn't expire will be a big change, and we can do that right now. It just has to be implemented in a cost-effective way into the marketplace. And
then that's one of those things where consumables, like the nice unknown about a scrubber is you don't know, and you have to change it because you don't know. You're taking a risk. Where sensors, you can see, what if people aren't familiar, you can see the millivolts on them, and but they'll drop out at any point in time. But you can look at the millivolts and be like, I think I'm okay. And
once we're solid state, we don't have to worry about calibrating. We don't have to worry about expiring. Same thing with CO2. Then suddenly we can trust the numbers coming from the CO2 sensor, and then we know exactly what our scrubber is doing.
Which would be nice. Do you think they're going to be more widespread going forward? Well,
I mean, they're expensive, and economically, we're in a we're in a recession already.
Yeah.
And the first thing to go is luxury stuff. Rebreathers are luxury. So,
Yep.
You know, you're feeling it in the dive shop already. But, you know, can we financially support rebreather diving? I don't know.
Right,
We're
yeah.
going to see. I think that'd be that, and travel and diving in general are going to be something that people cut from their lives when they face the realities of life ahead.
Right. The industry itself is running into
we've got to
roadblock.
rethink the industry in interesting ways. There's an opportunity in some ways, but it's going to require some creative thinking for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that? Where the industry might go? What you think might happen?
You know, I have been thinking about that a lot. I've been thinking about a smart manufacturer today might consider a model where they say, all right, we're going to support X number of regional goods stores, right? Say, okay, like, you know, hey, Jason's shop, we're going to support his shop. Then we're going to need one in, you know, New York State, or two in New York State, and some in different parts of Florida or whatever. And then tell you that you no longer need to buy and carry stock. And they create a visual, rich opportunity to display the options. And then you have some kind of a biomap device, like the kind of thing that Fourth Element does, in order to photograph you for a perfect fit for your suit. So someone comes into you, right, and says, hey, Jason, I want to learn how to dive, or hey, I want to buy this, or whatever. You biomap the person with 2 quick photographs, and then you start showing them options of what's the suitable equipment for them. And then they pick out what they want. And then you call the manufacturer, and you say, all right, they want this BC, they want this regulator with this configuration and that hose. And it's personally configured at the factory. It's shipped to you. You get it to the customer, do the final fit and adjustment. And there's an economic model that supports all of that. So, because, you know, the reality is it's hard enough for you to carry stock these days. Yeah. I used to own a dive shop. I know how bad it was 20 years ago. But to carry every size and every color and every brand and everything else. So I think there'll be less variety potentially available, but there'll be enough, right? Like, you know, how choosy do you have to be about this BCD versus that BCD, right? You want something that fits, that has the features that you want, and if those features could be custom configured for you at the manufacturer level and then shipped to you, the destination that does the fit, the training, and the pass off, and if the manufacturer prices it appropriately to support you because you've got to provide the air fills and the service in the future, that there is an opportunity for a model that economically works for all if everybody's not greedy, right?
There you go.
So your shop, the most important part of your shop is going to be some really nice big screens and a couch and like a place for people to hang out and tell stories and have visiting explorers, and it's going to be much more of a clubhouse than a place that's full of stuff, right?
And that's what we actually have already been going on. We've got the couch over there. We had to upgrade our couch because people were sitting on them, and now we're filling up the couches, and we got some screens. We still got plenty of product here. But
you're already doing these kinds of events. Like, you know, I was at your shop personally. Now we're online together, and these are the kinds of things that knit together a community.
Absolutely.
So is that scary? Sure, because it requires a whole new rethink at the manufacturing level. But in a way, you know, it does become more responsive to the customer. It becomes more specialized. There's less waste. There's less potential for economic hardship because you're not going to have to buy $100,000 worth of stock because someone says you have to if you want to sell their stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes it complicated, but that's so off of industry and on to I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but is there any, and I've been kind of asking everybody, is there any dive that you haven't done yet that you really want to do?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's tons. Are you kidding me? I don't call it a bucket list because I basically get to live my dream every day, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's all kinds of places all over the world that I still want to go to. Places that are beyond my depth range that I need an exosuit for, and stuff that's reasonable that I just haven't had the financial resources to visit. So yeah, I mean, I've got over 8,000 dives now in my log, but I've barely scratched the surface. I've been to every continent, every ocean, but lots more to do.
What was your, and I might know the answer to this one, but what was your scariest dive that you've done? And I think you kind of talked about it at our shop, but
yeah, I've had a few that I wasn't sure if I was going to come home from. I've been in a cave, trapped behind a scientist who panicked, got stuck, and the cave was only, as high as the space under your bed, basically. So your shoulders are scraping the ceiling, your belly's on the floor, and my partner got entangled, got stuck, panicked, silted it out, broke the guideline, and my one of two side mount tanks in wrestling to get my partner free started to free flow. So,
beautiful.
Yeah, I had to turn that hand wheel on and off for each breath and patch the guideline a couple times and managed to prevail.
Nice.
But yeah, that was a tough one.
What about the ice cave that I'm sure that you talked about at the shop?
Yeah, inside an Antarctic iceberg. So I was the first person to cave dive inside an iceberg. And when you're the first, there's no handbook that's been written. So we had no idea what we would encounter. And we encountered calving. We encountered these ferocious currents that swept us through the iceberg. And on one occasion, pinned us down to the point where we couldn't get out. And that was one where when I finally got out after turning a 1 hour dive into a 3 hour fight for our lives, first thing I said to the science officer was, "The cave tried to keep us today."
Yep. I mean, and you probably looks kind of like the cave, the movie, The Cave, huh?
Well, that's funny. I was the underwater unit director for that movie. If you haven't seen it, there's something to watch. I think you can still get it on Netflix.
Oh, you absolutely can. I think they sell it on PlayStation Network too, and it's all over the place. You can get it.
Yeah, that was an 8-month job, an 8-month-long job for me that started with having to build rebreathers for the cast and crew, to training, to script supervision, to supervising stunts, doing stunts, being a stunt double. It was an incredible job. But I have to tell you that Hollywood cave diving is probably more dangerous than traditional cave diving. It's crazy the things that happened on that set that we had to deal with. It was brutal.
And you were on Sanctum too, right?
I did the pitch trailer for Sanctum with James Cameron in Florida, but the film itself was shot in Australia, so I wasn't on the crew for that part of it. Yeah.
Heather Knowles has a question for you.
Hi Heather.
She says hi. How much time have you been able to spend bringing your work to audiences outside of diving? I've always wanted to see a diving film on the Banff Mountain Film Festival. It would be great if it reached broader, like-minded audiences.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the reason why I wrote my book, Into the Planet, My Life as a Cave Diver, was to, reach out to the world beyond our diving community, and that's been pretty successful. But there's another opportunity I'll give a plug for. I shot a movie called Under Thin Ice last year, and it's about climate change in the Arctic. I dive with polar bears, narwhals, belugas. It's a beautiful movie that I'm really proud of. And I was supposed to show it at the Canadian Embassy in Washington last week. It has been, streaming and playing all over the world, but it hadn't sold in the US yet.
Yep.
And so when it was canceled, we worked with the DC Environmental Film Festival to put it online, and until March 31st, you can see it for free. It's streaming. It's a 90-minute documentary, and it's reached all over the world, way beyond the diving marketplace. And it's the DC Environmental Film Festival, DCEFF. You can just Google that, and it's called Under Thin Ice. And we created an app to go with it too, and it's also free on Android and Mac. And it's called Discover the Arctic. So it's a really great app about all the wildlife of the Arctic, our journey, and climate change. So those resources have reached way beyond the industry, and I hope to keep doing more.
Very nice.
Thanks, Heather.
I'm going to post.
Hope you're doing good.
She's actually coming on later on, I think next week.
Oh, yay. All right.
Do one.
Awesome.
David and a couple other people, Josh Brackley, about their one of the things they found recently. I'm posting links for.
Yeah, they've been posting some cool mine diving stuff recently.
Yeah, that
pretty
one.
Awesome looking.
That's the Vermont one, right? So yeah, that's I've been trying to get out there. I haven't gotten out there yet. So
cool.
But yeah, it's beautiful out there, from what I've heard.
Yeah, so. I'd like to come down.
Yeah. Have you been doing St. Lawrence River at all much this past couple of years, or?
A little bit. A little bit. Ironically, like right now is the best time because probably the visibility is great. But like I said, I'm kind of in that ethical quandary in my mind right now as to when I decide to jump back in the water. I'm dying. I've only been out of the water for a couple of weeks. I'm dying. But I do realize that this is a little more important than my fulfillment of diving objectives right now.
What are your favorite couple of dives up in the river?
Oh,
that's pretty close for us.
Oh man. I have the hardest time with favorites because, I just love being in the water. Like I love free diving as much as I love tech diving. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be deep. It doesn't have to be huge. Sometimes the really simple stuff is special to me. Like I like the Wolf Island Ferry in Lake Ontario because
that wreck.
And because I rode on the Wolf Island Ferry. But I also have like deep wrecks that nobody else has been on in Lake Ontario that I love. I love Tobermory in the grotto, which you could just go swimming in. But it's special to me because I did one of my open water dives there, and it definitely opened my eyes to the possibility of cave diving. So, I have a really hard time saying what's the favorite. It's and I always, whatever it is, good viz or bad, I like the challenge of finding a way to photograph it so I can share what turned me on. Yeah,
I love that Wolf Islander. It's we try to get up there once or twice a year. It's a little bit of a hike for us, but it's
Well, and my family background is from that area, so my ancestors are all from there, and that's also what makes it special is the whole journey. Journey home.
What led you into diving? How'd you start diving?
I wanted to dive from the time I was a little kid. I don't even know how to describe it because no one in my family dives. No one in my sphere of awareness was a diver. But I watched Jacques Cousteau on Sunday nights, and I also grew up, watching the Apollo missions, and that inspired me to want to be an explorer. And I remember asking about diving, and my parents were like, "Oh, people don't dive in Canada. It's cold," And I just put away my money, and I thought, okay, well, I'll do it when I'm able. And I slowly saved my money, and at university age, finally had enough to go take a class. But literally from the open water weekend, like I bought all the equipment before my open water weekend, so I owned everything before my open water dives, and I did an open water weekend, and the next weekend I did my advanced class, and the next weekend I was up diving with friends, and that winter I did my rescue diver. I just rolled through one class and another. I was one of those, even though it was Canada, I had my ice diver that first winter, So
just rocking and rolling right after it, right?
I just knew this is what I wanted to do.
When did you start cave diving?
Well, on my open water weekend, my instructor took us to the grotto, which is probably not exactly a suitable spot for an open water dive, but that's retrospect. But just even swimming into that grotto, I went, oh, I already liked caving.
Mhm.
I don't have an ounce of claustrophobia, and the awareness that I could just breathe in and rise up in this 3-dimensional environment. I thought, whoa, this is for me. So that was, I guess, a first exposure. Then when I lived in Cayman, I always loved the caverns and stuff on the East End where I lived. And I was exploring inland looking for caves. And I did find one cool cave, my first exploration cave. And ironically, I only just learned that this might indeed be a tourist spot now in Cayman. So when Stephen Frink was interviewing me for the article that's out in Alert Diver, this issue of Alert Diver, it's a photographic essay of my work, but Stephen Frink interviews me about my life. He said to me, "Do you mean that show cave in East End?" And I said, "There's a show cave in East End?" He says, "Yes, there is." I said, "Well, that's probably the cave that I discovered back in the early '90s. I don't know for sure. I got to go visit it. I'm scheduled to go visit in September, and then once I go there, I'll let you know whether that's the cave or whether there's another one that they haven't found yet."
Right.
Of mine.
Yeah. I'll post a link to that article right now.
Oh yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah. I actually haven't seen the magazine yet, but I know it's out. So yeah, got a few messages about it.
Nice. That's good. When did you start getting? What's the best way to say it? I guess more exposure on a like presentation movie, more well known. How that kind of transition happened as an explorer, like what I'm trying to say. Like, there's not a great way to ask that question, I guess.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know that my educational background is in fine arts. So I have a visual communications background, and my first career in life, I had an ad agency. So I was working in advertising and then teaching scuba nights and weekends. And literally one day I went, oh, my life is backwards.
Yep.
Underwater being creative, not inside an office being creative. And so I sold everything and moved to the Cayman Islands and thought, all right, how do I do this? And I thought, well, how am I going to make money being an underwater professional beyond just being an instructor at a resort? That's how I cut my teeth, was being the instructor at the resort and taking pictures underwater. But I thought, I'll start taking pictures. I'll start writing articles for dive magazines, and slowly just started getting more and more material out there. And then when I moved to the U.S. to do more cave diving, I connected with my colleague of more than 15 years, Wes Skiles, and I started doing work in television and movies with him, and that was all she wrote, really. But it's always been this weird hybrid career of photography, writing, filmmaking, training, consulting, everything. So that if I was really busy in one aspect, I still had other things that I could do if the one aspect got quieter.
Yeah. Oh, it's the dive industry in general, right? All of it is that way.
Except that now everything disappeared.
Yes, exactly. Everything disappeared. Well, except for social media and writing, and I mean, you can still write and do some pictures and stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, just everything that actually had a pay associated with it. But I am creative. I will figure it out. Yes. It'll come together.
Yeah. What shop were you with in Cayman while you were teaching?
I was living at the Cayman Diving Lodge on the East End. So it was a little teeny 12-room hotel, dedicated divers resort. And back in the early 90s, that there was like kind of a rough road out to East End, but it was an hour's drive from the populated west side of Cayman. So we didn't get day trippers and snorkelers and everything else. We got people that came to the lodge for a week or two or a month. And we lived with them. We fed them 3 meals a day. We went diving with them. It was that kind of a live aboard experience on land, really.
Yep.
But for me, like the diving on the East End was just unbelievably, better than any of the other diving on the island. It's on the windward side. It's a little rougher, less dived, but beautiful sights. So that's where I was for 2.5 years, almost 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the sites that are harder to get to are the better ones, right? So
yeah, and the windward side of the island tends to be, beautiful, nutrient rich, robust coral and straight deep walls with beautiful swim throughs and tunnels and caverns and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah. So are you currently teaching still? You were talking about how you were a instructor previously. Do you still teach anything, or what do you do?
Yeah, I am still an instructor, and I've pretty much isolated it down to like cave diving and some of the real specialized aspects of rebreather and cave diving, because I have less and less time to be able to teach. Right now it's definitely a challenge, but yeah, I'm still involved in teaching and still involved in writing instructional materials and consulting with a few different agencies on safety practices and standards and things like that. Yeah.
I'm assuming the question will pop up, so before it pops up, I'll ask it. What rebreathers do you teach and dive? That's when we've been getting for your
So I'm diving the Hollis Prism 2 and the Liberty Side Mount. I'm only teaching on the Hollis Prism 2 now. I do have instructor credentials on about 12 rebreathers, all of which I've owned. Every rebreather that I teach on, I've owned and dived a lot. But I've been a serial user of different rebreathers over the years, and I will only teach one rebreather at a time, because I think your head's in one rebreather, and I think I serve my students well just by saying, listen, I'm going to teach you what I am most active on and what I'm using all the time, because that's where my muscle memory is. That's where my head's at. I mean, I still, when we talk bailout, I'll still like do a hand motion of woof. And that was my Cislunar Mark V. Now, my Cislunar Mark V, I started diving in 97, right? I still do that, right? The Hollis is a lever instead, but so it's interesting how some of that stuff sticks from your original. But yeah, I really think I dive my Prism a lot, and I really don't want to teach someone on something that I'm not diving a lot on.
Yeah. I think that's a massive point. I think there's so many people that, there's difference of opinion for a lot of people, but I'm in the exact same wheelhouse that you are, that you should be pretty limited on that whole aspect, and, to be hopping around different rebreathers. There's differences. I don't even dive different. I have my Prism 2 on my SMS 75 because I don't want to switch where anything is on technical dives. Everything's got to be in the exact same spot for me.
See, that's interesting, because I actually integrated my my Hollis Katana side mount onto my Prism so that it's the same the same harness exactly when I'm diving side mount or when I'm diving rebreather. But yeah, I agree. Like, I know there's some shops that will teach 5 or 6 different rebreathers an instructor. I'm like, how did they do that? Like, sure, principally all rebreathers are the same. There's a lot of material that's general, but the most important part of rebreather training in my mind is the time that you're spending in the water with the student. They can learn all the book learning, e-learning, right? But in the water and between the dives, when you're talking about specific instances of the conditions we've just dived and the experiences that we've just had. And I think that the student learns so much from watching the minutia of what you do and how you handle things and how their buddies do as well, that I just can't imagine wanting to teach more than one at the same time.
Yep. It looks like somebody from my shop asked what's her favorite CCR and does it depend on the dive, which is kind of what we just talked about. I'm assuming that's Sean that popped in there, but
there's something I can add there, because people always ask me, what should I buy? And when you ask the internet, what rebreather should I buy? Everyone on the internet will tell you whatever they're diving, right? Because they're into it. They're using it for a reason, and they've also spent 12 grand getting there or more. Right? So my answer is that the best rebreather is the one that's right for you. I think there's some bare minimums. Like I only want to dive a rebreather that's independently third-party tested and qualified, CE or equivalent, because we have a big enough market to demand at least that much testing of life support equipment. So this whole not providing that kind of material is to me absolutely a no-go for a rebreather. So you need that. You need to have local support. You need to have an instructor that's diving similar conditions and things that you are. So you need access to an instructor that can teach you on that rebreather, access to service. You don't want to ship it all the way around the world at huge financial, costs to get service. And beyond that, what's right for you, really. So that should be your favorite rebreather. There are a lot of good ones out there, as long as we're talking, level playing field, third-party independently tested CE or equivalent. Yeah.
I have the same opinion, but it's the same thing. It's I got into it. I left the side mount forum because of this, but like everybody's like, somebody asked their opinion on a couple of different things. Everybody just shouted out with whatever they're on with an exclamation point. Like, you're not giving any suggestion of any way, shape, or form. You're just saying what you have in your garage. So
that's right. It's interesting with rebreathers, though. You got to do a lot of research before you buy a rebreather. You have to know a lot before you take a class. And there are probably some people listening right now that go, what the hell is third-party independent testing, CE, equivalent, or other? Right. Or they're going, oh, well, I tried one in the pool and I like the XYZ. Yep. Well, you just fell in love with a harness. You just fell in love with something that was placed properly on your body, fitted. But you have absolutely no information from that tri-dive that would be useful for making a choice on a life support system. Yep. What you need to know about are concepts like work of breathing and CE testing and oxygen cell tracking and yada yada, and I could go on and on and on. So you need to know a lot before you make a choice. There's probably even rebreather divers that are listening now that go, I have no idea what she's talking about. And then I would say, I think you should try and get that test data from your manufacturer so you understand fully work of breathing and how your rebreather was tested and how it differs in canister roll-off from 40 meters to 100 meters. The duration that you have in 40 meters of water versus the duration that you have in 100 meters of water can be exponentially different from brand to brand and design to design. Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a lot of knowledge gap in our community on stuff like that. Yeah.
It hasn't popped up yet. I know it's going to be a question. Front mounted or back mounted counter lungs?
I just switched to the Prism's back mounted, which are kind of like back mounted slightly over the shoulder. And I do really like them. The work of breathing score, looking at the graphs and everything, is really good. So I'm happy with those. The one thing that I didn't like about the over-the-shoulder, like the over-the-shoulders were fine for me, right? Except that reaching around and grabbing, your dry suit dump in Arctic undergarments was sometimes a bit tough for me. I'm going, trying to reach it. And it's because there are stiffeners in those counter lungs. And so that's why I decided to try the back mounted. But then the wonderful thing about the back mounted is just how clean the front is, and because it's now on my Katana harness, it's exactly like my side mount this way. So I like it. So I didn't dislike the over the shoulders, other than that tough reach for me. I just do like a more open front, but only if you get the work of breathing with it. So that's my caveat.
That works. Yeah. Heather wants to know what your thoughts are on BOVs.
Oh, yeah, I'm opinionated on that.
Apparently.
Probably knows. Okay, so your BOV is only going to be useful if it is plumbed to the right gas in the right amount for the emergency, right? So if you just have a BOV and you're only plugged into your onboard dill, what good is it? You're still gonna have to switch to an off-board tank, right? So the benefit of a BOV is that with one hand, very quickly you can switch to open circuit. Now, why would you switch to open circuit? That's question number one. You have to switch to open circuit if you think that something's wrong, right? Or if you've had a catastrophic loop failure, ripping, tearing, disassembling the loop, or a CO2 emergency, right? Now, if you have a CO2 emergency, it's a really good thing to be able to switch quickly and easily, because when you have a CO2 emergency, taking one thing out of your mouth and putting another one in is a big deal. And I've been with people who've had a CO2 emergency. It's almost impossible to get them to make a switch, right? Now, if you catch the CO2 issue early enough, it's fine. You get off the loop, on open circuit, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the fact that if you have that BOV, it must be plumbed to a meaningful volume and type of gas, the right gas. So if you're doing a deep trimix dive, for instance, that means that you might have to have some kind of like an off-board system that's plugged into the counterlung, that's extra gas plumbing, that you're gonna have to switch at different courses of the dive so that it's always plugged to the right gas, so that you don't unintentionally bail out something hypoxic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So does that plumbing add new issues, new failure points? Does that plumbing add stuff that's not the equivalent of, EN 250, good breathing? Like you've got to be able to switch to something that is not going to cause or exacerbate CO2 issues. And unfortunately, some of the BOVs that people are using do not pass CE because of the volume within the BOV and the potential for carbon dioxide buildup.
Mm-hmm.
So all that being said, I've chosen not to use a BOV because I think that the simplicity of the switch, and I'm always practicing like on every dive, I think that works better for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if someone's only ever going to recreationally scuba dive in the 40-meter range, it sure makes a lot of sense to have a BOV,
mm-hmm.
again, because they can switch easily and they can come right up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I really like to keep things the same all the time. And again, for me, that means just using a DSV, multiple less failure points. And I'm trained and practiced on the switch.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I felt a little bit better about that too when I had the CO2 sensing available, which I don't have in the Prism, but
right.
We'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll get
definitely.
there.
One of the questions was Anna wants to hear a little bit more about maybe some of the dive sites you've done around the U.S. and maybe some of the ones you've liked. I think people are trying to find something to do heading out, and most of our watchers are from the U.S. right now, so I think it's a good question.
Okay. Well, I lived in cave country in Florida for almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I only moved back full-time to Canada a couple of years ago. So I love cave country. Whether you're a cave diver or not, the springs are incredible, and the rivers, some of the clear rivers are absolutely amazing drift
mm-hmm.
dives. I mean, North Florida is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Off the East Coast, Fort Lauderdale area, I love the deep wrecks there. They're amazing. Or even, the Oriskany.
Mm-hmm.
The Keys, it's definitely, I've seen that change quite a bit through my lifetime,
mm-hmm.
In terms of the decline of the quality of the reef life,
mm-hmm.
which kind of makes me sad. But there's some really exciting new stuff happening there with Coral Reef Restoration Society and the projects that they're doing there. And that's interesting to see in and of itself. Or Jules Verne Lodge is worth a hit.
Yep. I did my IE there.
Yeah. I mean, up and down the coast, the Carolinas, there's great wrecks, great sharky life. Megalodon shark teeth
mm-hmm.
in the Cooper River or offshore in the Carolinas. Upstate New York, dive in the Finger Lakes,
right.
Lake Champlain. St. Lawrence River is probably one of the best kept secrets that still a lot of people don't know about. It's practically tropical in the summertime, right?
Uh-huh.
Really warm. And who knew,
mm-hmm.
on the Canadian-U.S. border that you could get 78-degree water in August.
Right. Yeah.
Year to year,
mm-hmm.
I mean, it used to be a lot clearer. Sometimes that 78-degree water is really pumping out a lot of algae bloom nowadays, but it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, the number of people that don't realize how much diving is there is just
so much.
It's crazy.
You could spend your whole lifetime just doing the wrecks of the St. Lawrence. Yeah.
You do a lot with the Great Lakes piece. I mean, obviously Ontario because that's close to you, but other ones
Yeah, so I learned to dive in Tobermory, like Huron, and I still love Tobermory so much. Superior's great. Oh God, all the Great Lakes are great. I was fortunate enough to dive Lake Erie before zebra mussels, but now all the wrecks are big, massive piles of zebra mussels.
Yep.
But I'm of the philosophy, I'll dive anywhere, right? Like I've only been back here in the Ottawa area for a couple of years, and so I'm just jumping in everywhere. You know, just Googling places that were intentionally flooded from dams, and I'm finding, good, bad, and ugly places. I'm jumping in the Ottawa River, which some people are like, "What? This sucks. It's polluted." I'm like, well, there's a lot of wrecks in there.
Yeah.
And even right outside my house, I just go. I use it's called the Mississippi River. It's a different Mississippi River, but I just use the river there for jumping in and staying fresh. And if I haven't been on my rebreather in a couple of weeks, and I'm going on a big dive, I'll jump in there and do a dive. It's my pool, basically.
Yep.
And then I found all kinds of like bottles and broken china and things in the river. I even found what is still to be determined, either a Rolex or a Folex watch.
I love it.
Yeah.
How far is that? You said you got the cave it's a cave that's not too far away from you, right? So it's less than an hour. Well, about an hour drive from me, and there's 10 kilometers of cave passages. But it's high flow, dark, cold. It's nasty, but it's really interesting because there's some endangered species that I'm helping to survey and document for a local biologist at the Museum of Nature, and this particular part of the Ottawa River is free of zebra mussels, so that's pretty exciting. And we're trying to figure out why. And because it's free of zebra mussels, there's a lot of species that have survived here that have gone extinct elsewhere. Interesting.
Yeah,
I like it. What is some very interesting, what's your favorite animal you've been interacted with diving wise? I wanted to word it correctly.
Whale sharks, maybe, humpback whales. Well, polar bears, narwhals. Yeah. Again, that's really hard to choose a favorite. I mean, there's been some really amazing experiences. I mean, one of my favorite marine life experiences was I was swimming in a pod of 100 humpback whales, and in and amongst Capeland, it was like, holy crap! And it actually was holy crap, because a mother and baby kept coming in really close to me and the mother showing off the baby, and she came around about 5 times. I was in the water for 5 hours. So she kept coming by over and over again, and then a big bull comes by really close enough that my buddy Cass actually high-fived the pectoral fin, and then his tail fluke went right across the dome of my camera within like a millimeter. And the backwash was so strong that I was like, like tumbled backwards. And then that big bull humpback took an enormous shit. And I was just like, whoa. Like, I could smell like the mix of capelin and crap through my mask.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That was fun.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
So what advice could you have for some newer divers just trying to go out and find some things to do? We spent a whole lot of time on tech recently, and I kind of want to come back around to some more recreational type stuff.
Yeah. Just go out and do it. I mean, I remember when I started diving, and I bought every book that was available. We didn't have the internet to do a search, right? So I bought every book that was available. Like, where can I dive? Where can I do this? And that seemed to be like the biggest mystery. Like, where do people dive? And I would go through the book and I'd be like, okay, well, I just saw the Maple Dawn wreck, and but I've never been here. I've never been to the St. Lawrence. I'll go to the St. Lawrence, and who can take me there? And I felt like, I guess I had the impression that there was some sort of like it had to be written about in order to be a dive site, right?
Yep.
And I would say to people now is anything is a dive site. So just go out and explore. You don't have to jump on a boat charter, shore dive, right? You're going to jump in a lot of places and go, all right, I did it. I won't do that again, right? But any place is a potential dive site if you have permission to jump in the water. I mean, underneath a dock, right? Has its own interesting wildlife and potential for like treasure. So any place is a dive site. Just go out and do it. And the more you do it, the more you're going to love it, and buy your equipment so that you can do that. Because when you own your equipment, you're going to dive a lot more. When it fits you well and it's what you want, you're going to dive a lot more.
Yeah. And that brings up an interesting point, that the idea that, okay, so I'm starting out diving, so I'm going to dive the spots that everyone dives, but I aspire to be the people that dive the spots where no one else has dove. Well, you can just go out and dive spots that no one else dove. Just find somebody else to dive with and dive them, and problem solved.
We are all explorers. And you know, like in cave diving, when we're looking for new caves, even when we're in a cave-rich area, we might dive 10 different spots. Like in Mexico, we might dive 10 different cenotes before we find one that goes, right? And it's the same way with just jumping in, lakes and rivers around here. That's what I'm doing these days. I'm just going to all these different places, and as long as I've got, permission, I'll jump in and give a little putz around, and I'm looking for things that are interesting. Like I don't have to find a wreck. Like if the thing is full of crayfish, then I'm gonna find out more about crayfish, or maybe do some macro photography. Like right now with this cave in the Ottawa River, I'm studying the sex life of mussels.
Nice.
And you might go, what? But it's pretty interesting. Like these endangered mussels that we have can only survive, and their reproductive cycle can only happen if they're associated with a host lake sturgeon. So there's lake sturgeon I get to look at too.
Wow. Nice.
So there's always something. If you enjoy being in the water, you'll find something everywhere.
I guess the natural next question would be, how do you deal with, property owners at that point in time? I know that's somewhat the situation in Mexico and Florida with the caves. I mean, I'm not experienced with that, but I know that's mitigating that is interesting. But the same thing up here is what you'd have to go through. You said get permission. How do you do that?
Yeah. So, in the old days, when I was a youngster, we used to do sneak diving, right? To go sneak into a cave diving site. And that was just flat out wrong. It's trespassing. It's not right. And these days, it's really, really important to ensure that you have landowner permission if you're accessing someone's land to get to a dive site. But if you contact them and just say, hey, I'm really interested in going diving. I have a waiver that I'd like to give you, that I'm willing to sign, that will give you some comfort that there's never going to be a legal ramification if something happens to me. And here's my promise to you. I'm going to come back from this dive and we're going to have a coffee. I'm going to take you out for coffee and tell you what I learned, or show you the pictures or whatever. So I've managed to get into a lot of caves that people have said no to others on, because I'm willing to bring them back the stories and the pictures. Like, make it an exchange. It's not, you give me this access. It's hey, if you give me this access, then let's get together. And I've made some really good friends that way. So that's a good way to do it. Of course, the other option is that that you access the nearest boat ramp and then you just go dive offshore, so that you're not affecting anybody's landowner rights. So I have an inflatable kayak, like a good inflatable kayak made by Hobie Cat. It's got those little foot pedals, right? It's a kayak paddle. And I could just throw that in the back of the car and go anywhere and paddle to a location. And then I'm not affecting anybody's landowner relations. It's just like, to give you an example, Ginny Springs, that so many people go to, they're the landowners, but they don't own the water. So when you are paying your entry fee there, you're paying them an access fee to their property, right? But if you actually got in the Santa Fe River in your own boat and you went to the cave entrance of your cave diver, right, and you anchored your boat, not contacting their land, they don't control the access to that cave itself. So legally, they're the landowner, but not the water owner. So understand riparian rights, like understand where someone's land stops and where the public access begins, and then you won't, step on anyone's toes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the which you kind of left out a portion of, the first half is pretty self-explanatory. You grab the inflatable, you jump in the water, you paddle it to where you want to do, and then you get out of the inflatable. But it's an inflatable kayak, which leads to the question of, how do you get back into the kayak, or do you just swim back to the dock?
No, it's pretty easy. When I side mount dive, I can get in and out. Like I used to do this for accessing like Rock Bluff Cave, if you've ever been there in Florida, because we didn't have landowner permission. We would just paddle in, and I can get in and out of that that kayak okay with side mounts. It's a little tougher with the rebreather, but it is possible.
Really? So do you just hang the cylinders and pop in, or do you roll yourself back in there?
Yeah, so I actually sort of load the boat from the water and then pull my body in. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's
flip everything in case you upset the boat.
Yeah, I bet. Have you upset the boat before?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. It sounds like there's a story there.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're learning, like practice.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of grew up in a canoe, so I'm really, really comfortable. Like even, back when I was living on the west coast of Florida, we used to paddle offshore in the canoe just because the west coast of Florida is a lot of sawgrass swamp, but there's a lot of sinkholes just offshore. And the easiest way to get to those was just to throw everything in the canoe. So we used to throw like 2 cislunar rebreathers and, 4, 6, or 8 cylinders to go do some of those deep sinks out there. And we would paddle out in the canoe and actually get in and out of the canoe with all that gear.
Wow. That's
it
impressive.
is possible.
Yeah. And you just anchor it down and tie it off and go for your dive, huh?
Depending on where you are, you got to really think about what will I do if this boat is not there when I come back? Right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Not just because the anchor might cut loose, but if you're leaving an empty boat in certain areas, it might not be there when you come back. So bring a topside buddy to babysit and help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where was I going to go with that? Well, that's a very interesting progression on how to go about that. And so pretty much I like that idea of the waiver, of saying here's a waiver, and here's a two-way relationship on this diving that makes it so that it's a little bit easier. With the U.S. being as litigious as it is, it complicates things. Right. I know we've had that conversation before. So it complicates it, but I like that.
Some people will say no, but there's always something that you can offer. Like there's other caves in Florida that I wanted to get into, sinkholes I wanted to get into that were full of trash, right? And so I'm like, hey, I'll clean it up. And in fact, the Florida Speleological Society, the dry caving side of things, that's the deal they have. They're like, we will clean any sinkhole in Florida. We'll get all the trash out of there. The deal is that first we'll give you the waivers so that nobody's going to sue you. But when the sinkhole is clean, we get to go caving if there's a cave, or we get to go diving if there's a dive. So there's always something that you can trade.
I love that. So you guys do a cleanup, and then you agree for cleanup, but it is essentially sight unseen. We're going to clean the site up. If we get something great, we get something. If not, you just get a clean. You get a clean
sinkhole. Yeah.
So that's a more win on their side, but so it's a very good way of positioning that. I like that. I think that's something that everybody listening should pay attention to if they're looking for new sites, which is great.
Well, even when you think of in Florida, we used to have access to a spring called Telford Spring. We used to use it a lot, but so did a lot of local people that didn't appreciate it in the way the cave divers did, and there was trash. It was a mess constantly. a mess. And so the NSS-CDS, the National Speleological Society cave diving section, went to the landowner, who said, I'm just going to close it up. I'm just not going to let people come. Are we getting I just heard like an emergency broadcast alert. I think that's in my house.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, probably an Amber Alert. So we went to the landowner and said, what problems are you having? And they're like, well, everybody's just leaving trash there. And we're like, listen, we know it's not the cave divers, but we're going to put a dumpster there, and we are going to commit to cleaning it up once a week. Will that work for you? And they're like, sure, that'll work for us. And that worked for more than a decade, until one of those local people was swinging on a rope swing, broke their neck, and then chose to sue the landowner. And then that closed it up for everybody.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And there's stories like that, and that's what makes people a little shy about allowing people access. But
yeah.
Well, we are just about out of time, actually.
Okay.
I don't want to take too much of your time, but
yeah, no worries. I'm going for a bike ride. It's sunny and it's warm. It's about 9 degrees out there, so yeah.
That's Celsius for anyone that's not paying attention. It's like, wait, it's what? Yeah. So, well, I really appreciate your time. And if there's anything that I put up most of your links, I believe, to stuff.
Cool.
I'll put a link up to your books also if I can find them. And then try and get as much action over to those videos as possible. I know that people are looking for stuff to do.
Cool.
So.
Hey, thanks for everything you're doing at Deep Stop Scuba, and also, thanks for a lot of people might not know that you're going back into the belly of the beast tonight. You're going to quarantine from your own family so that you can help others, and that is pretty amazing. It's a sacrifice, and I know I and everyone appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we will. And I'll be plenty around of doing nothing for hours and hours and hours on end. So if you want to chat again, we're welcome to chat.
Okay. I don't know. They might not let you out of that hospital ever.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, all right, Jill. Well, thank you very much. Take care of yourself.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks.
Well.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.